Welcome back to Delightfully Dysfunctional. I'm Keilani, and I'm here with James.
Hi, everyone.
And today I'm going to talk about psychedelics for healing and growth, and from controversy to care. It has been a controversial topic. It still is, but I'm really excited about illuminating, there we go, some of the latest research and some of the process of decriminalizing and what different states, the steps they've taken, as well as access to care and what that looks like. So first, I just want to think about like all the things that we were taught about psychedelics. Do any come to mind for you, James? Like when it comes to caution around them?
Yeah, I mean, my whole life, I thought it was just like recreational and it was dangerous, you know, like I was a dare kid. And then like in the news, when psychedelics make headlines, like Matthew Perry, you know, things like that. But then, I mean, I've become enlightened over the last year or so.
Yeah. And just if anyone didn't know, I believe anyways, the Matthew Perry case is being deemed like a murder investigation, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is not about recreational use, unsafe use, unethical use. This is about the therapeutic application of these medicines. But a lot of the stigma around psychedelics might be people who use them are reckless and irresponsible, that they make you go crazy and you might not come back, that they're dangerous, or that they're illegal and therefore wrong. And a lot of this was part of my worldview for quite some time. I know I've mentioned that my husband had been listening about different podcasts and articles and doing his own research about psychedelic therapy and was telling me about it at home. And the first thing that I said was, that sounds like wackadoodle shit. So now here I am eating my words because providing an education and an understanding of them is something that I'm really passionate about and love. And when it comes to their danger, I'd say, well, when they're used safely and ethically, that's very much mitigated.
Yeah.
Similarly, when we think about some things that we have open access to, like alcohol, alcohol can be incredibly dangerous.
For sure.
I've known at least 3 people in the last 3 years who have passed away due to alcohol-related illness. So I want us to just kind of put everything in context, and very much the thought of people who are using them recklessly and irresponsibly. There are people on that spectrum. I'm not going to ignore that fact. There are also many people who are researchers and scientists and professionals and normal humans operating in the world, moms and dads, and just people who have a lot of their own personal growth and healing that they're wanting to navigate.
Yeah.
And these are a really powerful tool. So this is just a means to learn more.
Totally. And
the word psychedelic is actually a Greek word. It comes from the prefix psyche, which means mind or soul, and delos, which means to make visible or to reveal. So one interpretation is mind manifesting. And it just is something that helps make your mind or inner thoughts more visible. Almost like it helps you understand what's going on in your brain in a new way. It gives you a new perspective. I would even imagine your brain like a computer, and psychedelics help you see a new way that computer can work.
Yeah.
It can help people talk about things that have been bothering them or made them feel sad, and it allows them to do so with more ease and process through things with more ease. But ultimately, those things have to be done and should be done with someone who is trained and knows how to work with that medicine and with an individual. What was your experience like? Because you had a ketamine experience about a month ago or so.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It was the beginning of August, but it was amazing. I was really skeptical for forever. And then I committed to just a healing journey, and I wanted to try that. So when I did, it gave me so many visual representations of almost like my brain had these little parables stored ready for me. And so I can, now I can reference those. We talked about one of our episodes, the lake, and
The lake represented like quieting the mind and stillness. And I'd say that any of our like really profound thoughts about our life or about a higher connection to a higher sense of self or to God, the universe, he, she, whoever it may be, the creator, they come in moments of stillness. And we don't give ourselves enough of that. So I think there was a beautiful representation of that in your journey. Yeah,
and which I'm thankful for, because it almost like the psychedelic, like I love that the word, the Greek root is like almost like an unveiling of the brain. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I experienced, where all these pictures were just I had to like remove the veil to access them, and that was my experience.
Right. Yeah, removing the veil. The veil is actually like a term that is used a lot in understanding psychedelics and those journeys. And we have so many unconscious forces that rule our life in ways that we aren't aware of. You know, the sense of worth or perfectionism or achievement that just runs on autopilot and doesn't actually create the life that makes us feel happy and at peace. And I think that these are medicines that help us make some more sense of that, so we can come back here to life school and make some adjustments, do things a little differently. So speaking of these like mystical experiences that come up, I had the deep honor of getting to see Professor Roland Griffiths, who was the director of Psychedelics and Consciousness for Johns Hopkins University, and I got to see him speak at the MAPS conference last summer. And he passed away about a year ago, so just a few months afterwards. And this is a quote from him. "The hallmark feature of the mystical experience that we can now occasion with high probability is the sense of the interconnectedness of all things, a sense of unity, a sense of open-heartedness or love, a noetic quality suggesting that this experience is more real than everyday waking consciousness. I believe that the experience of unity is of key importance to understanding the potential existential shifts that people can undergo after having these kinds of experiences." So basically, the mystical experiences of these medicines allow you to really make powerful shifts and live a more open-hearted and connected life, is how I would summarize that.
Yeah, I mean, just the human experience for everyone, I've learned that peace, to like exist in peace, is really more of like an excavation project versus like a scaling a mountain, you know. And so the thought of like revealing things that already exist inside of you, I feel like that's way more consistent with what I've experienced, what I know to be true of, like us and the world just buries our authenticity. And so unburying it, excavating it, that's really the goal. And so like psychedelics is like, from other accounts that I've heard, it's really just like it sounds like it's like a removing of a wall, or going on, just like temporarily lowering the wall, and then accessing like the buried inner child or something.
And the goal is, I'll continue to share, but the goal is really of integrating that into your life. Like I've reached a point now that under the right conditions, I can tap into that. And honestly, I can tap into a little bit of that like in session quite easily. And I'm just operating from this place of like just deep and profound love for my clients, and I see the connectedness, and I can just be in that space. Now, when that session wraps up and my to-do list starts piling into my mind, it does get harder, and it's a practice. But we're able to continue to excavate outside of those journeys, those experiences, and that's the ultimate goal in this type of therapy work. So I'm going to list up some of the traditional psychedelics. A non-traditional one is actually ketamine, because ketamine is actually a dissociative anesthetic that does provide somewhat of a psychedelic experience, but just the way that it operates in your brain takes a different route to get there. So some others that you may have heard of. I'd be curious if any of these I list you haven't heard of, actually. Okay. So LSD,
heard of it,
DMT, MDMA, psilocybin and magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, mescaline, which is the same as peyote.
Never heard of mescaline. Definitely heard of peyote.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. Salvia, ibogaine, and 5-MeO-DMT. So those are some of the in the category of psychedelics, a lot of the most common. And interestingly enough, ibogaine is actually being used in Kentucky, I believe, for treating opioid addiction because it is such a problem. So,
yeah, that's right. Sabrina was talking about that. I remember. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's really interesting. And when we think about examples in ancient history, they're there. It's not like a new thing. It's been buried for as long as you and I have been alive, like the concept of psychedelics, because they were made illegal in 1970. But examples of their use in ancient history have been there. In fact, 10,000 years before the Common Era in sub-Saharan Africa, there are cave paintings depicting psilocybin mushrooms being used for spiritual growth.
Wow.
And 1,500 years before the Common Era, the ancient Grecians made a brew with ergot, which is a fungus that contains alkaloids similar to LSD. And again, was used for spiritual growth.
Yeah.
There's evidence even in Texas cave paintings with the Native Americans dating back to 3,780 before the Common Era of peyote being used, and has still continued to be used far past that date and continues to.
Yeah.
So there are so many examples. 2,000 years before the Common Era, indigenous groups in South America began using ayahuasca, and that continues to be used today for healing and spiritual practices. So these were not medicines that were used recreationally. They were used for deep spiritual work. And I think, when I say spiritual, I'm not meaning religious. That is a route that many people take, and that is totally fine. This is not a place of judgment, but spiritual is just a connectedness and that unity, a sense of something greater and bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you call a man who provides psilocybin?
Gosh,
Fun guy.
Did you look up mushroom jokes, or did that come to you?
That just came to me.
Like, did you research mushroom?
No.
That's good.
Thank you. Thank you.
We gotta save that one.
Yeah.
Terence McKenna, that's another quote I'd like to read. He was, I believe, an ethnobiologist, and his quote is, "Psychedelics are illegal not because of a loving government and concern that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong." They open you up to the possibility of just understanding life differently, might be another way that I phrase that. So these medicines, as we're going to continue down understanding more about psychedelics and why they were made illegal, and also the states that are now looking at opening them up for therapeutic use, we're going to question some of that perhaps, and at least be curious, wonder. Just talking about the history a bit more recently, in the early 1900s, MDMA and LSD were created. And in the 1950s and 60s, psilocybin and MDMA started to be used in clinical studies with a lot of promise from reputable universities like Harvard. MDMA was used with therapeutic use for couples work a lot because it actually quiets the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, and then you have this surge of serotonin and open-heartedness. So now you're able to really hear and understand your partner with more depth and more softness, and communicate more love and care for them. So these conflicts that people can get stuck in, all of a sudden, they were able to really have a lot of care for the person and find more solution and see more of the common ways that they love one another and operate from that place instead of from division. Yeah.
Again, the wall's coming down.
Yeah, exactly. Those defenses drop.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And then in 1970, the Controlled Substance Act passed in the U.S., criminalizing the use of most psychedelics and leading to a major decline in research. So this is where most people's narrative of psychedelics begin, because there were certainly stories of people doing things like jumping out of third-story windows. And I know that like a couple years ago, even here at the Gorge at the concert, there was someone who I want to say, I'm sure it was a variety of drugs actually, committed a violent act. And those are terrible and sad. I'd also say if we look at some of the more common drugs that we view as more socially acceptable, like alcohol, and I'm using the word drug to describe alcohol just because
alcohol's a drug. Let's just say it.
It's a substance that alters the way that you behave and think and process information, and that has caused also a lot of violent acts.
Yeah, absolutely. They tried to do prohibition here, and it was so popular or alcohol was just more popular than the law.
Right, yeah. And then in 1985, MDMA is classified as a Schedule I drug in the U.S. after gaining popularity as a recreational drug, despite early research showing its potential to treat PTSD and promote emotional openness in therapy. And that's really unfortunate, once again, because it had so much promise and potential, but it was being abused. And other terminology for MDMA that might be more common is knowing it as ecstasy or Molly.
Okay, yeah, now I understand.
Yeah, click. So now we are in what everyone is calling the psychedelic renaissance. Very exciting, because research opened up and again is showing it as a breakthrough medicine. The FDA is expected to approve MDMA for therapeutic use by 2025.
Oh, wow. That's soon.
Yeah. And Massachusetts, several cities have decriminalized psychedelics. New York, Michigan, California, and Washington are also taking steps to provide therapeutic access to psychedelics. Washington, that's the state we're in now, specifically has a task force that they've created for providing access to veterans and to first responders. So this is really cool. It's actually it's a bipartisan issue that everyone agrees on, because we want to help the people that are putting themselves at risk for our greater good. And right now they're suffering. They're suffering. And it seems like when we have these tools in the toolbox that have showed so much promise, we should be taking bigger steps and be excited, and there should be more education about them out there in the world.
Yeah.
And Denver, Colorado became the first U.S. city to decriminalize psilocybin. And in Oregon, it became the first U.S. state to legalize the supervised therapeutic use of psilocybin for mental health treatment. So there are steps being made, and a lot of those steps, I'm just not sure if the general public knows. Like, in your opinion, because you're newer to understanding like the landscape of psychedelics, do you think that like other people in your life know that these other states or that these steps and this research is happening?
No.
Right.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the whole thing, I think if you were to poll 10,000 people, I think 99.9% of them would still have a stigmatized view of psychedelics, you know? And, I mean, because I was actually, in my work, somebody brought up ketamine-assisted therapy, and everyone was making fun of it. And I just kind of stayed quiet because I was like, ooh, I don't want to like get in trouble, because obviously my like boss, you know, has a stigmatized view, and I might get, you know. And so it's like, oh, that was unfortunate, you know, that there's still like a shame or a hiding. You know, it's still really taboo. Right. But I mean, people like you are pioneering and trying to eliminate that taboo and really create, like destigmatize it,
right?
Which needs to be.
In 10 years, I think we're going to have a very different understanding and relationship with these medicines.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of steps to get there. I want it to be safe and ethical, as do so many. That's really the goal. But would you be surprised that in a recent poll that was in 2023, 61% of U.S. registered voters supported legalizing psychedelics.
That's majority.
Yeah, for regulated therapeutic use.
That's amazing.
So there is a shift that's happening, and I'm excited about it. And this presentation, again, this is for educational purposes. I'm not promoting any kind of illegal drug use. I'm simply wanting to provide education into what's happening and if there's any curiosity with these medicines. So when it comes to the scheduling of drugs, I find it really interesting that so many of the psychedelics we're talking about are really in the Schedule 1 category, which means that they have zero therapeutic use and that they are highly addictive. When actually in these studies, when done in a controlled way, they're not addictive.
Yeah.
And they're highly therapeutic. So again, just wanting you to kind of question the things that we have taught and been learned, like about the way that our government operates with these medicines and why these medicines are at that level of scheduling is something we should really wonder, especially when there are some real concerns. I think, again, I'm bringing up alcohol and then tobacco as well. I don't see any therapeutic use.
No.
And they are definitely highly addictive.
For sure.
Now, I'm not wanting to eliminate either of those for anyone to have access to them. I'm just using that as a benchmark for understanding whether or not these psychedelic medicines really deserve to be a Schedule 1. They certainly don't fit based on the current research.
Yeah.
So in 2000, Johns Hopkins University became the first institution to receive approval from the FDA to research psilocybin. In 2013, the Beckley Foundation and Imperial College of London began studies on the potential use of psilocybin to treat depression. And early results showed extreme promise. In fact, I just saw a headline for a recent study saying that using psilocybin to treat depression was more effective than traditional SSRIs. When it comes to SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or a traditional antidepressant, about 66% see some improvement, and 33% feel like there is more improvement, while another 33, they don't feel any improvement. So I'm like categorizing the sum with the people who feel more improvement. That's that 67%. And then there's 33% that didn't feel like there was any kind of improvement. And again, that 67%, they're still faced with a lot of side effects. And it's a medicine that you always have to take.
Yeah.
Where psilocybin, ketamine, MDMA, these are not medicines that you take daily or on a regular basis. It's something that you experience and then you're okay.
Yeah, you're improved.
Yeah, you might down the road, I suppose, like some people do, like when they feel like, oh, I need another moment to really reflect in that way, they might have another experience, but the majority of people are okay. In 2017, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration grants breakthrough therapy designation to MDMA-assisted therapy for treating PTSD and to psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. In 2017, and yet that isn't something that we're talking about and have easy access.
Yeah.
Like people are continuing to suffer.
Gosh, 7 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important that we begin these conversations and are brave enough to do so.
Yeah.
And in 2023, researchers on psychedelics expands with major institutions continuing to research all of these medicines, which is really exciting. And the clinical trials for MDMA continue with a lot of promise. In fact, for MDMA specifically, the success rate for treating PTSD is 67 to 88%. That is remarkable.
Yeah.
That is remarkable. And this is in the study, it was people who had severe PTSD. Some of them were not able to have normal jobs and like really live their life to its fullest potential. And the way that they provided this medicine was a heavy bout of therapy there, probably about a month. And then over a course of 12 weeks, combined with therapy, there were 3 MDMA sessions. And the long-term benefits were still there a year later for those participants. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the FDA did not approve MDMA for therapeutic use, which it was being discussed, and it was had that opportunity in late summer. And many of us, myself included, would say that a lot of that has to do with pharmaceutical companies how would they then be able to
make
sell
their
these
money?
right, when it's a medicine that cures the pain and the ailment.
You're not going to come back for more.
Right. So it's something to think about. And the other reason, which is something to be of concern, is that if there's an unethical therapist, MDMA could create a situation for inappropriate relationship with a client, which is why we need to discuss the different ways to, again, make it a very safe and ethical medicine. But there are means to do so, whether that's via telehealth with a therapist, whether in the study it was 2 therapists there with each individual client so that there was kind of another set of eyes. But there are ways and means to do so. When we talk about trauma, I think this is another piece that is important for us to understand because it's a very misunderstood thing. And when I think about the DSM or it's the manual, the diagnostic and statistical manual for all of the mental health conditions under the sun, I really just see that as a means for insurance to pay for the care. And it's a way for a lot of people to also feel like, oh, well, then everyone who's in this category here, there's a path forward in treatment.
Right.
Or there's a support system, right? But ultimately, trauma creates everything that is within the DSM. And there are some people who do have a true chemical imbalance, but the majority of people who are diagnosed, it is coming from trauma. And it's just what way does that materialize and bubble up within your system?
Yeah.
And we should understand it that way. And that's what the leaders that I follow in trauma are saying, like Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, or Gabor Mate, who is a profound doctor and speaker and educator on trauma. So a couple of quotes from them. After trauma, the world is experienced with a different nervous system. That's Bessel van der Kolk. So your ability to stay calm in certain situations or not feel triggered and flooded with emotion.
Yeah.
It's been impacted by a trauma.
Right.
And it's less so about what that trauma is and more so what is happening within your nervous system.
Totally. Yeah, I experienced that just recently. I was feeling a lot of post-traumatic stress. I'm not going to call it a disorder, but yeah, and I really felt, and once I stopped re-injuring myself and going back to the sources of that stress, I noticed my nervous system calming down.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that a lot of experts will go back to that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a lens that the majority of the world sees things through, but I do think that it is the reality. And we have, there's a lot of ways that we might compare trauma. And I would say that, even just emotional trauma and neglect has a lot of longstanding repercussions and a ripple effect. And so it's not about the severity on the surface or of what's visible. I don't care. It's about how is it manifesting in you?
Yeah.
And what can we do about that? And when it comes to trauma, a factor that actually mitigates it is the number of close and meaningful relationships that you have that builds resilience. So, depending on what someone's life circumstance is, it's not something that we should be comparing and contrasting. It's just what's really happening with that person and how can we understand?
Yeah.
Gabor Mate says the essence of trauma is that as young children, we lose connection to ourselves to survive our environment.
Oh my gosh, that's the theme, the thesis of the last 3 months of my life is that statement.
Losing connection to ourselves. And this is a means to reconnect with oneself.
Yeah.
And these are both, these are brilliant authors. These are people that are incredibly well educated and speak around the world, and they promote these medicines.
Yeah.
They promote these medicines for healing. So how does trauma affect us? Well, there's a really long list. Low self-esteem and feelings of deep shame, flashbacks and panic attacks, difficulty in relationships, hypervigilance, substance abuse, sleep problems, self-harm, avoidance, overworking, overachieving, perfectionism, negative perception of self, emotional numbness, body image issues, anger issues, issues with boundaries, risky behavior, social withdrawal. And I see so many people walking around with these hardships, these burdens on them, and just pretending and putting on a mask every day that feels heavy.
Yeah.
I would like there to be more candor and openness around all of these topics, because that's how we can find that sense of connection and create a path forward to actually heal, instead of just burying it and pretending it's not there.
Yeah, burying, that's the word.
I want to talk a little bit about microdosing too, because I know that that's something that a lot of people are interested in and curious about. You know, I guess as the word says, microdose is a very tiny, tiny dose. It means taking a very small amount of a substance, almost too much to really notice too many perceptual changes, but it can help give someone a bit more clarity or feel a little bit more open-hearted. And the specific substance when I'm speaking about microdosing in this context is psilocybin, although there are other substances that can be microdosed. So it's like breaking up a chocolate bar into 20 or 30 little pieces and just eating one little piece. That's a microdose. And people who microdose do not do it every day. It's every few days. You don't want to build up a tolerance.
Right.
And there's more that can be learned about that. I'm just going to save it for that much right now. And in the context of this, I suppose I'd be speaking to the states that provide legal access for psilocybin. In the terms of psychedelic-assisted therapy, the key pieces that we want to keep in mind that make it different than someone who's doing recreational use is set and setting. So what is set and setting? The set refers to the mindset, the intention that you have, the mental state of the person going through the psychedelic experience. So it's really important to work with someone who does have experience with these medicines, to prepare someone well, to help them get an idea of their experience and some tools to help ground them. They might encourage and practice some mindfulness or emotional processing beforehand, and that just ensures that that person is in a really optimal and primed state to dive deeper and to navigate those waters with the medicine in their system. And then setting refers to the actual physical and social environment where the experience is taking place. So the ambiance, the location, the supportive people there, the rituals around it. And I can imagine, you know, in a setting like some of these medicines are taken in a lot of party scenes or festivals and like rave settings. I mean, what's interesting is our eyes are just like a bulged out part of our brain. Like this is part of your brain, and it actually is the most energy is used for your sight. It's all so much processing there. So if you're using these substances and your eyes are open in a very overstimulating environment, you're going to have a very different experience than when you are in the proper setting that feels calm and relaxing with someone that you trust. And a lot of times these sessions incorporate an eye mask so that one goes inward. So it's as if it's a completely different medicine. It feels very different.
Yeah.
And psychedelic integration is also a part of how one makes sense of their experience. So having a session with someone that you really trust to navigate through that and to share what that experience was, it helps you kind of not feel as overwhelmed or fragmented, but to make sense of it and to apply those insights to your life in a meaningful way. It's a really crucial piece of long-term therapeutic outcomes, and it's a huge part of helping you address unresolved trauma, reframe negative beliefs, and develop new coping skills for all of life's challenges. There was one study with ketamine specifically with veterans. A lot of these studies are done with veterans because we want to help our veterans, and they were doing ketamine infusions. Some of them had the set and setting figured out. They had their eye mask. They were listening to a playlist of music that helped evoke emotion to help them process through it. And the others were just scrolling on their phone and being more mindless and not very intentional. And the results were clear. The people who had proper set and setting had much better outcomes for those sessions.
So you're saying Instagram is not more effective for healing than
definitively Instagram is not going to help you.
Okay. What if it's like a really good post? I'm just kidding.
It's a really good post.
If you follow us on Instagram, you'll find some healing.
That's good. Yeah. There you go.
At Delightful Pod.
At Delightful Pod. Check
also
us
on
out.
YouTube.
Yeah.
More importantly, YouTube. Yeah.
Oh, and you can find my Instagram at Keilani _evolve. But either way, we're trying to share so much compassion and care out there, and that's really our ultimate goal in everything that we're doing. I want to share a few different stories and quotes from people too. My wife and I were on the verge of divorce. We'd grown so far apart that it felt like we didn't even know each other anymore. MDMA therapy allowed us to open up in a new way we hadn't in years. We were able to talk honestly without fear or anger getting in the way. It was like we rediscovered the love we had for each other. And that was a couple that was involved in a study, an MDMA clinical trial for people in relationships. So it's just a beautiful way for them to emotionally reconnect after having a lot of long-standing issues and reported feeling closer than ever before. And in my work with this particular medicine with my husband, I thought that I've always had a really healthy relationship. And like any relationship, it's not perfect. So there were our little issues that we'd have. I couldn't have even imagined how beautiful and connected our relationship could be. Yeah. Like right now, it has so much compassion and a depth of understanding. There's so much intimacy and care and love for each other that has just been amplified.
Yeah.
Another story. I felt like I had been carrying a weight that no one else could see. After just a few sessions of ketamine therapy, it was like someone turned on a light inside of me. I could finally see beyond the darkness that had trapped me for so long. It didn't fix everything overnight, but it gave me a new perspective and the energy to keep going. I felt hope for the first time in years. And that was someone who was a cancer patient who was experiencing a lot of end-of-life anxiety. And they participated in this study, and during that session just feeling this profound sense of connectedness and understanding that there's more after death.
Yeah.
And that mirrors a bit of experience that I had with ketamine. As a ketamine-assisted therapist, I have experienced the medicine as part of my training because I feel like if you haven't experienced it, I'm not going to be a very good guide for it. And I had a beautiful visual, and it was just representing the different phases of life and an understanding that transition of death was just like any transition within life. It could come with ease. It wasn't a hard stop. That there was more. Our soul moved on.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on death?
On death?
That's a deep question I'm throwing out at you.
Oh, man. Well, I had thoughts on like the connected, the couple that...
okay, tell me about that one.
Well, because I have this like floating theory that I've really been chewing on, and that is just like the human need for authenticity, and like the world is starved for it, and we're all starved for it. And so because the things that you're describing are like really aligned with my theory, and that is like the excavation of our authentic self. And so like when we're able, like I think that when we talk about honoring our inner child, it's because when we were a child, that was the last time most of us can remember being our authentic self. And so like when you remove, even temporarily, like with psychedelics, when you remove all of the corrections and the rubble that your authentic self is buried under, just for a moment, and you're able to reconnect with your authenticity, that is where the healing occurs, because the whole goal of life is to become your authentic self. And so like when I hear about the couple that felt so connected, I think it's because both of them were carrying the burden of inauthenticity, if that's a word, and then they were able to remove it temporarily and reconnect, and it's like that's where the healing happens. And so it's just such a theme I'm noticing, especially in my own experience. And so it's beautiful, especially people with PTSD, where they have experienced the punishments of the reality and the evils of the world. And so for them to just have a moment where they can actually just like become a kid again, and like have that authenticity where they're not hating themselves, right. Then it's that I feel like allows the restful place where the wounds start to scab and start to heal. And it just a little bit of time, and the more time you can buy where your healing can progress is like invaluable. And it's like and most of us go, like when we finally go on a healing journey, we sort of like accidentally stumble upon that whole thing of like, oh, I kept picking these scabs and I never allowed them to heal. But it's in this stillness and this calm, peaceful authenticity that the healing can only occur, you know? And so, sorry, that's...
No, I mean, and we cover it up and we disassociate and we are uncomfortable with sitting in stillness because I think that authentic self is screaming for us to make changes in our life.
Exactly.
And those unconscious forces of, I need to make more money, I need to be better, I need to be perfect, I need to be lovable. So you fall into codependent patterns.
Right.
And all these things that you build your house on are... It's made of dust.
Right.
It's not solid.
Yeah. And then you get to a point where you like, I need to tear this whole thing down because I had abandoned myself. Yeah. And then there you are. And then it's like a whole, because you left your authentic self as a child, then you have a lot of years where you have to kind of grow up, you know, in that authenticity. But then that's where life actually happens, the best life.
And this is part of the process, though.
Yeah.
I think this is, here at Life School, this is part of the process, is reconnecting with that inner child.
Totally.
And in fact, in a lot of the journeys that I've had, an emphasis on play and doing, like, play in this world I created for you.
Yeah.
Have fun. This is where, and when I think about children and having worked at an elementary school, kids learn when they're having fun.
Right.
When it's with play.
Well, and kids are so true to their authentic self. Because like when you were a kid, you picked out a shirt and you put it on because you loved it. You didn't do it because you were trying to impress anyone. You were like, I like my Care Bears shirt because I think it's pretty. You know, you look in the mirror and you loved what you saw. And then like you went and did the things that lit your soul on fire, and you didn't ask anyone permission, but then eventually people started correcting you and then more correction. And that's like one pebble at a time. And then pretty soon you start listening to those little corrections, and then you start reshaping who you are, because if you can be that corrected version, then you're worthy of that love. But really, it's like, no, you were worthy of love when you were authentic, when you were that kid.
You're always worthy.
Yeah.
And it's the most beautiful message that I love sharing with people. And I just believe it. I just believe it in my core. Like, I see any person that I get to have an ounce of a connection with, I just want to open that super highway for them to feel it and know it, because I see it in them.
It's like, be you, and just love your, it's this is good stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah. I know, we're both getting like emotional because it is. It's like the stuff of life.
Well,
you know?
It's the discovery that like you have to navigate through your pain to finally arrive on this thing that you actually knew when you were tiny.
Right.
You know?
How do we become more like children?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I want to share a couple of these stories, and I'll share a little bit more of a personal story too around it, but I'm really loving this flow of conversation.
Yeah.
I want to share this story of a veteran, and he went through the MDMA trials and said, MDMA therapy saved my life after years of being stuck in a cycle of anger, anxiety, and fear. MDMA allowed me to revisit the memories of war without feeling overwhelmed. I was able to finally process what happened and understand it from a different perspective. Now I'm more at peace with myself. And that's the thing. The way that we learn is to get very intimate with our suffering. But if the suffering that happened is so intense that it creates then, a panic and an anxiety and anger, a defense, we're not able to touch it. It has barbed wire around it. It's too tender. And these are medicines that allow you to interact with that from a very different place, where you can find more meaning to that suffering and heal. So that's really, really beautiful. And then finally, a woman who had treatment-resistant depression. They tried several other medications and were not effective. Said that ketamine therapy was like a reset button for my brain. I had been stuck in this deep fog of depression for years, and nothing seemed to help. After the first session, it was like the weight was lifted. I could see things more clearly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. It wasn't an instant cure, but it gave me the space I needed to start feeling better and really engage in therapy. And, I I've even probably said this, that psychedelics expedite your healing. And I want to give a caveat to that, because it's not a cure-all and it's not a fit for everyone. There are exceptions where this isn't going to be a medicine that is right for you. And it is an opportunity, though, as this quote says, to actually be able to access like healing on a different level that you weren't able to access before.
Right.
Which is still work. It is not an easy pill that fixes everything. It's, here's a pill so you can feel things with less pain and still process through them. And there will still be hard and challenging moments.
Yeah.
But now you have some tools to do so and to find your center and to find your authenticity, to navigate you and be your guide instead of wandering in the dark.
Right.
And in my own personal experience just this week, I feel such profound gratitude for the version of me that went down this journey and down this road, because I would not have been able to navigate things recently with as much ease.
Yeah.
And right now, like I've had a complicated relationship with my dad. And it's been that way my whole life. And when he wasn't there, I know it felt very much like there must be something really intrinsically wrong with me. There must be something really terrible and wrong. I must be bad. And I thought, I'm going to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to be perfect so that he will regret this. I'm going to be perfect so that I can prove to myself that it's nothing, that I'm not bad. And it was a really toxic pattern of a lot of overachieving and beating myself up, and a critical voice that was there and saying yes to things that weren't really aligned with my truest self.
Yeah.
And this week it was a decision that was very easy of, that's not a person that benefits me, and that's not a person that's going to benefit my family or my children.
Yeah.
And I send him so much love. Both of the father figures that I had, they did not take the opportunity to rise to the occasion to be there.
Yeah.
And I've had to send them so much love in this parting, but know that my boundaries are firm.
For sure.
And strong.
Well, and you've spent so much time and strength to cultivate like where you are now, that you're so protective of it, because you don't want to go back to that place of perfectionism.
No, that's the thing. There's nothing there for me. I don't have to protect it with defensiveness. It's just that this path yields so much more beauty for me.
Yeah.
I wish you beauty too, but your path is going elsewhere, and I wish you well. And it's, again, just creating this stronger, refortified connection to my highest good. And when I am in a good place, I can do more good for others.
Right.
And that is my purpose here.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited to continue providing this service. And the things that I'm able to help with are just providing some education around microdosing psilocybin, providing preparation and integration services with MDMA therapy, although I'm not a drug dealer, I do not provide access, and I'm not really promoting illegal use. And ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is something that I am clinically trained in and can provide in the state of Washington. So I'm really excited to offer those services alongside with traditional therapy and life coaching that I offer. I have found them to be a few very powerful tools in the toolbox. Not the only ones, there are many, but very powerful tools. And I don't know, James, do you have any other questions and thoughts after this talk today?
No, I think we covered a lot. It was really informative and really great conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me. Thanks for becoming more and more curious. I know the first time that I brought it up, you were like, this sounds crazy.
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of baggage. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me with your curiosity and being open.
Of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us, Delightful Humans. Please check us out on YouTube as well. And you can go to Coach Keilani for some freebies and more information to schedule a discovery call with me if you feel like we would be a good fit, because I would love to work with you. And without further ado, we will let you go, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.